I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to throw this out there. I have a channel over on YouTube, Life as which basically hosts highlights from these audio conversations that I have with these great guests. They typically run 10 to 15 minutes, and they're there to kind of present a different vantage point. You know, for people that aren't into audio, aren't into podcasts, but are still looking for career advice, ideas, help, all that great stuff, send them over to YouTube. Like I said, Life as And if you do get over there, I would love that like or subscribe. I mean, it's the best way to let that algorithm know that the content is worth sharing and should be out there. So anyway, I do thank you for letting me plug this a little bit, but I think it's about time to get into today's episode. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I knew a bunch of people who insisted that their future involved sport and athletics. Whether that meant becoming an actual athlete, coach, or otherwise, these individuals were hell-bent on the idea of pursuing that dream. Now, fast forwarding a bit to the present, I could most definitely count the number of people who made it. Why? Well, it's somewhat obvious. I mean, such a road is not easy. On today's episode, I have a guest lined up who has absolutely put in the time, effort, and energy to make his athletic dream and professional existence in that realm a reality. Meet Simon Cochrane. He's a New Zealand-based athlete and coach with his hyper-focused skill set and knowledge within endurance sports. And he works with athletes of all backgrounds and abilities to help them push past their own boundaries. Now, what makes this conversation extra special is that Simon himself has this extraordinary background in which he's achieved feats few could wrap their minds around, let alone attempt. In fact, he's the current world record holder of an event you'll soon hear about. I mean, all up, this conversation delivers unique insights covering the business of athletic coaching and all it entails. Plus, it offers up thoughts from an accomplished athlete on things like training, athletic technology, and so much more. I've got to say, I'm really keen to share this episode with you, so let me more formally introduce Simon to you, and we can launch into all of this. Simon Cochrane is the founder and coach at Athletic Peak, an endurance sports company that has a close-knit community of like-minded athletes all around the globe. And these are athletes that want to push the boundaries of what they think is possible, and that is where Simon comes in. With this incredible history of endurance racing achievement behind Simon, in having raced over 37 Ironman events, yeah, you heard that right, 37 Ironman events, multiple ultramarathons, 24-hour runs, and more recently, Ultraman Triathlons, he is quite possibly one of the most authoritative voices on peak performance out there. And for those not in the know, Ultraman is a 3-day triathlon consisting of 10 kilometers swimming, 420 kilometers of cycling, and finishing with an 84-kilometer double marathon. Yeah, it's the real deal. And Simon, by the way, is the current world champion for such Ultraman competitions. And he holds the world record, which I might add he captured by shaving 80 minutes off the previous record. Now, as you might have guessed, he lives to push the boundaries in endurance and really challenge himself and his athletes to strive for greatness. His approach to working with athletes is best summarized as calculated, structured, and fun. And in being part of the fitness industry for 15 years, coupled with his own experiences and passion for it all, Simon is a leading voice within the peak performance space. So with all of this noted, I'd love to welcome you to my conversation with Simon Cochrane. Yeah, so welcome to the program. How are you doing today, Simon?
Good, thanks. Good. Nice day here in New Zealand.
Yeah. Looking forward to this talk for quite some time. I mean, all that you've accomplished and what you're all about, quite frankly, I think is going to be of great interest to a lot of listeners, including myself as well. So yeah, quite keen to get into this. I do have this first segment lined up today. It's something called Coloring Wikipedia. And as my listeners know, it's a segment where I just read off a definition of something related to what the guest does. And I went with this term of peak performance. And unfortunately, Wikipedia didn't have an entry for this, surprisingly so. So I did borrow from this other website, the Peak Performance Center. So let me just read that out for you, and then maybe you could give your comments. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sure. That'd be interesting.
All right. So here we go. Peak performance. Peak performance is a level of exceptional functioning in which a person effortlessly performs an activity to the maximum of their ability while fully focused and immersed in feelings of confidence, engagement, and enjoyment. Short and sweet, there it is. First take, what do you think of that?
That's a pretty generic term, I'd say. And I'd say that straight away for me, that sort of, I guess, target athlete or would be a shorter duration peak performance. Because when I think about the other end of the spectrum of my long endurance sort of thing, you're never fully focused on top of your game. So I think the peak performance for the endurance side of things is a lot more free flowing and sort of, hardworking, grittier, digging in. So you're not always on top of your game or feeling good, but you have to be able to work through those situations to get the peak performance as well.
That's an interesting take. Would you say that, at least the way that definition presents it, that feeling of peak performance would be uniform for most athletes, or do you think it's personalized in some way?
I'd say it's definitely personalized. And I'd say most of the athletes, even when they have a good race, don't feel like it was peak performance. So they're always looking for that next step or that magic race. And then probably down the line, they'll look back and realize that that was their peak and they should have realized that earlier.
Okay, all right. Well, this might be an opportune time to learn a little bit more about your work. I mean, I did mention it off the top here, but in terms of Athletic Peak, the company that you run based around endurance sports training and coaching, maybe you could share with listeners a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I've been coaching for around 15 years now. And just in the last couple of years, I've really stepped it up to my full-time job. So I'm coaching a range of athletes, anyone from beginner runners right through to multi-day world championship style events. And I like to create the community here, not only here, but online as well. So all the athletes are supporting each other along the way, which makes a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah. And you're still quite active yourself in terms of competition and whatnot.
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm fairly active. The last couple of years has been the biggest couple of years of competing and also the training side of things for me. So it's been a busy couple of years with work and life and my own athletic pursuits.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. I'm guessing just really quickly here, a thought just popped in my mind. Like with you still so active in the sport, I'm guessing that rub off there helps the people that you're coaching tremendously because what you're uncovering for yourself in your own training habits and what you're picking up tips, whatever it might be, or new approaches or the latest science on this or that, you're able to share that with your clients. Would that be a correct assumption or?
Yeah, definitely. I'd hope so. And also, provide some real world guidance during sessions, training camps, that sort of thing. And then, obviously, I'm doing a lot of experimental work with my own training. I'm coaching myself at the moment as well because I love, working out new strategies and theories, putting them to the test, and then being able to cross that info over to the athletes and the prescription of their training schedules.
I'll get this other segment here, a day in the life, and it is as it sounds. Like I'd love to hear how you go about structuring your day, and I'm guessing that word is a big one for you. You know, being a peak performance athlete like yourself. You know, how do you line things up not only for yourself, but then also like to be able to serve others in your coaching role?
Yeah, so every day is a little bit different, but I mean, I guess they're all structured fairly similar. First thing is early wake up. So it's generally around 4:40 a.m. The alarm goes off. Be up, have black coffee, and off to the pool. So that's for a 90-minute to 2-hour swim squad session, and getting in early enough to make sure I'm home for breakfast with the kids and the family, doing all the breakfast and preschool
I hear
work to get the kids
you.
kids out the house. And then usually it will be, a couple of hours of work, checking the emails, follow-ups on some programs and that sort of thing. And then jumping into a pretty solid training session again before lunch. And then usually another little block of work after lunch, just while the food's digesting. And then quite often there'll be a third training session and then school pickup. And if there's school sports or swimming lessons, that will be in the afternoon. So I like to get all my training done before school and daycare is finished for the day. So then in the afternoon, we've got, family time, dinner time. And then quite often after dinner, there'll be a little bit more of work or sometimes some Zoom call catch ups in the evening. But I just like to try and keep that to 2 or so days a week in the evenings.
Okay.
And then the weekends, depending on how the week's gone, it depends what events I've got coming up, whether it's shorter sessions or sometimes it's the full day missions every few weeks.
I mean, a couple questions here. I mean, to what degree are you altering those schedules? I mean, obviously life gets in the way and there's certain things that come up, but I mean, are you constantly tweaking that to make it work for you? Or is this something that you've had set in stone for like several years now?
I'd say it's set in stone, but it's flexible because I'm coaching myself. I can adjust the program pretty easily. If something pops up, I can shuffle things around if need be. So I think that's a benefit for me at this stage of my training and life, so I can make things flow on a bit easier.
Yeah, in the course of running this program, I've spoken to a few different people within this space. And one of the things that always comes up is this notion of technology and more specifically wearable technology and all the data that's associated with, trying to achieve and find peak performance, I suppose. So in terms of that side of it for yourself, I'm guessing you're immersed in that world and all of that, what that represents. But does that data ever change the way that you're approaching things? For example, in terms of, again, returning to this point of how you structure a day, like, well, based off this data, which I've just learned, maybe I got to pull back in this area, whereas I should push harder here. And that changes your schedule and the way you approach a day or a week.
Yeah, the way I approach it and the way I try and teach my athletes is having the data there, but you have to know the feeling deep inside you, and that trumps everything. So if everything feels like it's flowing good, you've got good energy, you're recovering well from sessions, it doesn't matter what the numbers are saying, but if you're feeling good, then we're on the right track. If you're not feeling good, and even if the numbers are saying you are, then something needs to change. So it always is good to have the numbers there as a guide, but I like to be able to make that call off real world feelings rather than numbers.
Yeah, I like that insight. I think that sort of like simplifies it because I think it can be a bit overwhelming for people. I think with all this technology and all the data that's out there, that it can almost, in a way, start to rule the way that you're running your life and perhaps your training as well. So, just returning to the roots there and just really understanding that, yeah, it probably comes down to just knowing yourself and where you're at any given time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially in the terms of over analyzing, if you've got your watch or your ring that's telling you how you slept, and if it's telling you slept crap but you woke up feeling good, then that's not going to be helping you as well. So for certain periods, if people are being affected by the data, then I'll say, how about we switch that off for a bit? That's not a beneficial tool at the moment. And then even for me in my training, I haven't worn a heart rate monitor for 10 years. I know when I'm working hard, and a number is not going to adjust the way I'm attacking a session or a race. For me, I think if I saw a heart rate, it would either be, yeah, too high for a certain section, and then it mentally is showing you that you're working too hard. Whereas if you're feeling good, roll with it, and quite often you'll be able to push a bit harder.
I like that. It's a balanced perspective there. Moving along, I've got another segment lined up for us here. It's called Pathways. I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you made your way into the work that you're doing. I mean, I'm guessing that, within your youth, you must have had some sort of affection for performance and sports and all these different things. But all the same, I'd still love to hear this from you.
Yeah, so early on, I was a personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach in the gym, really interested in anatomy, physiology, and I guess performance and the strength side of the training. So having a good background and understanding of the body definitely has helped along the way with programming and periodization and recovery. And then, yeah, I think I was just drawn towards the endurance events once I had done a couple myself and saw a few opportunities in different ways to approach training that I thought, yeah, could be a benefit. Especially, I think finding more efficient ways of doing similar sessions just for people with busy lives and who want to get the most out of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of your youth, when you were a child, I mean, were you always drawn towards sport and athletics? I'm guessing that was probably a big part of your upbringing.
I mean, I didn't do my first triathlon sort of endurance event until I was 24. So quite a late adapter there, really. But when I was younger, I played every sport from soccer, rugby, rock climbing, motocross, kickboxing, a full range of sports. But I think I was drawn towards the individual sports because I was disappointed with the teams I was in when other players weren't putting in the same amount of effort, and that affects the result. Whereas endurance running, triathlon, that sort of thing, it's you and you. So if you haven't put the work in, you won't get the results. And I think I was drawn to that.
Would you say that that self-will has always just been part of your own DNA and your own personal makeup? Like, again, within youth, and that's just carried on over into, when you got into marathons, ultra marathons?
To a point, yes, but I think you really develop I guess, the mental strength and commitment to the bigger cause the deeper you get into it, and just learning different strategies and ways to, I guess, adapt and overcome.
All right. Well, moving along, I've got this other segment of Q&A discovery, and kind of continue this back and forth here. And I'd like to transition over into your work with clients. I'm guessing that they're drawn to you based off of the wealth of experiences that you've had and training knowledge surely you possess. But that said, I mean, flipping the script here a little bit, you must also be looking for something in particular in deciding to work with a particular client. I mean, how does it work that way for you? Are you quite involved in terms of being a bit finicky in terms of who you're going to work with, or what types of skills or what types of mindsets that you're looking to align with?
I can now because I do have a wait list of about 10 athletes. So I can be a bit pickier, which is nice. Years ago, I was taking on a lot of people, and you sort of, you gel with some people a lot
Yeah.
more naturally, and a few, fall by the wayside because it doesn't work out for whatever reason. And that's the same in any industry, and it's good. But at the moment, I think the type of athletes that are drawn to me are a natural fit because they know a bit about my history, my racing, my approach. And then once I've had an initial chat or Zoom call, I know pretty quickly if we're on the same page. And if we are, then it's all in on both sides. And I like to get to know the people pretty well, what makes them tick. But any motivated athlete in this long endurance sport, I seem to get on with them fairly well.
In terms of, I guess, this notion of like calibrating expectations to a certain degree, I mean, certainly for what you've done and what you've accomplished, and I'm guessing notions of accountability, honesty, and just, this utter dedication to cause are big things for you. And like I said, like part of your DNA and your personal makeup. But what is it like when you are working with someone who, as dedicated as they might be and as driven as they might be, are unable to match your levels of intensity? Like, how do you reconcile that? How do you deal with that?
So I think we just step back, and I think everyone can achieve a lot more than they think, but it's going to take a hell of a lot more effort and time than they think as well. So I think a lot of people will be seeing some results and thinking, right, I'm keen to get there. But when I ask them, are you actually willing to put in 3 seasons of work of 15 to 20 hours a week to get there? You work out how committed someone is. So yeah, everyone can achieve anything. It's just the time frame and how much time you've got to fit into your week is how quickly you can get there.
Is it ever difficult for you though? I mean, in terms of that, where like again, like the way you're wired, like you're maybe interpreting the world one way, where like, okay, this is what you need to do. You need these 15, 20 hours a week to achieve this by this time. And maybe somebody you're working with, they want all these things and they understand it, but they, like I said, the intensity is tough to match. Does that ever become an issue for you, or is that something that you're able to calibrate and adjust for?
Yeah, I think I'm able to calibrate that and just understand what, I guess, their mindset's like, what their life is like as well, and just understanding what their situation is. As long as they're putting in 100% effort to the time frames that they've got, then I'm happy that they're doing all they can at the moment. And I guess the only training you're going to benefit from is the training you can recover from. So even if someone's got 20 hours a week, if they're training hard for 20 hours a week, but they're smashed and their work productivity or their family life isn't good, then, we have to dial it back to get the balance right, and then to make sure everything's running smoothly.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I keep harping on this point is myself being interested in sport for quite some time, and certainly not getting to anywhere close to the level of yourself or others within the sports that you're involved in. But all the same, like recognizing that peak performers oftentimes have this different sort of mindset or view of the world, and what they demand of not only themselves, they sometimes can demand that of others without even knowing, perhaps, and the stress and pressures that can, place on individuals. Somebody like a Michael Jordan comes to mind, who's so intently focused on what he was trying to achieve that, he was famously a bit difficult to work with as a teammate, like people such as him.
Yep.
And there's been other examples, like Kobe Bryant also comes to mind, and several others. So I was curious, I mean, again, your feats and your accomplishments speak for themselves. You're a world record holder in your own right. And I was curious whether or not, that balance between you wanting to achieve, but then having to work with somebody who just can't match that level of intensity. But I think you've, answered that question already, but I was just.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think I'm really good at breaking it down into smaller ways to look at it. So, like, say someone's got a 5 kilometer race that they want to improve their time on, and you're just looking at if you can improve on what you're already doing, then we're heading in the right direction. And with endurance sports and any sports, consistency is the key. So, as long as you're still heading in the right direction, then that's a positive, that builds the confidence. And then, as I say, it's just that time frame of how much you can train, how much you can recover from, and that's how fast up the consistency line you'll be traveling.
Got it. Yeah, I'm definitely picking up that vibe from you, and I think that speaks to itself as well. Your approach, and obviously, like when your livelihood is depending on the relationships that you have with your clients, I'm sure you have to find ways of toning things down a little bit, and like I said, calibrating expectations and ensuring that you're helping them achieve whatever goals that they have for themselves. So yeah.
And then there's also times where you are calling them out, kicking them up the arse, and making them do a bit more. But it's knowing when to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's knowing your clients, right? Some people want that, others don't. There's another question here in terms of like sports psychology and the attempted mastery of it, because I think it's always ongoing. To what degree are you addressing those issues or those aspects with your training, with clients?
Yeah, I think the more I delve into these longer, more extreme events, you realize how much of a percentage it is all in the mind. So, yeah, like say my 24-hour run event I did a couple of years ago, I had never run more than 100 kilometers or 10 hours. So once you're past that point, obviously it's very physical, but it is your mind that controls the effort, the intensity, and also the way you're thinking to be able to control the pacing, control the nutrition intake. Doing a lot more of the longer, harder sessions, and I'm getting my athletes to push their boundaries, and then you're getting some feedback on how they were feeling, how it went, and then I think adjusting things going forward from there.
That must be an absolutely fascinating area for yourself to dive into. Like, as you just said, I mean, probably at that point, when you're running, 10 hours, 10 plus hours, or whatever it might be, surely, yeah, most of that is becoming a mental exercise where you're finding ways or tactics to sort of block out whatever issues that you might be having or could have, and just, pushing yourself to keep going, obviously controlling some of the other physical elements, how you're feeling and whatnot. But really, I'm assuming here that a lot of it comes down to just how well you're able to master or control those emotions that you're going through in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. And another side of that is, say you had two athletes who were exactly the same fitness and prepared the same. And if you're standing on the start line together, it literally is who is willing to either make the right decisions in the right time or push themselves that extra bit. And when you're talking, races over 100 miles or a few days like Ultraman, that's where the percentages of, you're pushing yourself 1% more, maybe 3 hours at the finish line of a 20-hour race. So, yeah, I love that side of things. And challenging my athletes in certain sessions where they look at the session they've got coming up in a couple of weeks and they're crapping themselves because they know it's more than they've ever done before, or there's some sort of part of the session where they're being challenged a lot more than they ever have been. And then 9 times out of 10, they will nail that. And the confidence that they build from that is a roll-on effect. So it's working out what areas they need challenging in, overcoming that in training. So then when you get to race day, they're more confident than athletes of similar abilities, so they can get more out of themselves on the day.
Now, I got this one last question here within the segment. I guess, like, in yourself intimately knowing what it takes to, set a personal best and what that feeling is like once you do, I'd love to know how that feeling contrasts for you as a coach when you're working with somebody and you're helping them achieve that moment or that feat.
Yeah, that's probably more exciting for me than my own achievements. Seeing someone set out a goal, nail the process all the way along, and then get that result that they're after. It's pretty satisfying, not only as a coach, but as a friend of the athlete, and just seeing their reaction to all the hard work that they've put in as well.
What do you think goes into that? I mean, like that's something that a lot of people say and a lot of people, explain, but like also at the same time on the flip side, like you yourself training for X amount of hours and achieving on a certain level, that's got to feel wonderful as well. So like,
Yeah, I think I probably get the satisfaction out of obviously their enjoyment and their result, but also the satisfaction that the programming and coaching has gone well along the way, and that's added to the result. So yeah, so you sort of get both ends of the spectrum.
yeah. Well, one follow-on question in terms of all of this is the work that you're doing and like the level of reward and fulfillment that you get from one being an athlete yourself, but then also two, like you just mentioned, helping others. The meaning behind all of this, I suppose. Well, how would you encapsulate all of that or bring all of that together? Like, how do you assign value to everything that you're part of?
I think I just like showing people that a they can do a hell of a lot more than they think. They're a lot stronger. They're a lot tougher than they realize. And I like to be able to show that in some of the events that I've been doing as well. Obviously, I get satisfaction out of the training, the results that I get, but also the roll-on effect that the results show others that you could do a lot more. And if that's motivating people to either get into the sport or just to push themselves harder, then yeah, that's a huge part.
Well, thanks for sharing that. We do have this middle segment here, a water cooler story segment. And here I just ask, guests to indulge listeners with a story related to what they do. So I'm really keen to hear what you have for us today, Simon.
Yeah, interesting stories. Oh, there'd be tons, but I think the one that stands out is the 24-hour run event I did a couple of years back. That's probably my most satisfying race still, because the race had been going for about 6 or 7 years before I decided to have a go. And it's a 6 kilometer lap around this lake called the Blue Lake 24-hour challenge. And you literally have to line up and just run as many laps as you can in 24 hours. No one had ever got to the elusive 200 kilometers. I think 160 had been the longest before that. And the event had this trophy called the Claw, which had the 200 kilometers on it. No one had ever got it. No one had ever got close. And I sort of did my numbers, worked out, did some training on the course. And a few months out, I was like, right, I reckon I can do that. So I just went in fairly quiet. The race director guy said, oh, here comes another elite athlete coming to fail. So that gave me a bit of fire. And yeah, long story short, just got the job done. I had an hour and a half to spare and got 201 Ks done. And the satisfaction of that, not only for people saying that it couldn't be done, you'll fail, but also the satisfaction of doing the training, working out the nutrition strategies and pacing along the way to get it done was massive. And the cool thing about that event is I could have a lot of mates, athletes, family members jump in for certain laps and run with me to keep me company like right through the night and into the morning when you're 20 hours deep still running, but having those special people there with you, made for a pretty amazing event. So
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's almost unimaginable. Like I just
I
can't
look
even
back.
wrap my mind around this. Really,
Yeah, I look back to some 200 kilometer bike rides I do, and I think of where I've been, and I think far out, I actually ran that far in one day. So yeah, so it still seems quite crazy to me, but I finished that well in control. So then that opens my mind to thinking, wow, how much further can we go? How much crazier can we get?
Yeah, that's a word that might come to mind for some people, but all the same, like I can see how,
Yeah,
like once you're, enraptured and within this world, and you're pushing boundaries not only for yourself, but also too, I guess, like even this notion of inspiring others, right? Like whether or not somebody's going to do what you just did, I think it speaks to this bigger picture of like tackling the impossible or the perceived impossibility of a certain action, right?
your new normal becomes a way higher level. Like a lot of my athletes, I'm getting to run a marathon in training. Like that's their new normal, a long run, and they're not scared by that. So on the way to training for these longer endurance events, their new normal, their new bar is just lifted so high that other people are looking in and thinking, "Wow, that's crazy," but they're just thinking that's me now. That's my standard, and where to from there.
I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about something I mentioned off the top when I was introducing you in terms of the Ultraman Triathlon, this 3-day event, 10 kilometers of swimming, 420 kilometers of cycling, finishing with a smooth 84-kilometer double marathon. What was that like? Anything you'd like to share about that? Because I think that is absolutely, for me, like when I was reading that off, when I was researching it, like that was certainly stood out. And not only that, I mean, you're a world record holder for this. Like, what emotions do you feel about all of that? Like that event, the accomplishment, the feat, and like all of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people have said, even 6 months before that event, I didn't know what it was, and you come straight in and break the world record. But I look at it as I've got 38 Ironmans under my belt now. I've been training endurance for 15 years, which has been predominantly swimming, biking, and running. So it's literally been a 15-year build up towards that. It's not jumping straight in and getting the world record. It's been a long grind, a long process. So that was very natural to me. I mean, obviously the distances are a little bit longer, but I had also been getting into some ultra running. Same thing with that 200K run. So when you normalize a double marathon run on that day 3, for me, I think going into this Ultraman season, I've been one of the first ones to actually race them rather than just aiming to complete. So same thing, I stepped back and I thought, right, worked out the numbers, worked out the training schedule, same thing with the nutrition, the recovery, and just built up to, nearly doing one in training. Like one weekend I did a 10K swim on the Friday, a 300K bike on the Saturday, and a 60K run on the Sunday. And I hit all the paces and felt pretty good along the way. So then you dial things around to get to the race day in peak performance shape, get the mindset right, and then it all came together pretty good. So that was pretty satisfying. I got the balance right with the training, recovery, and got the most out of myself on the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, after achieving something like that, like what's next for you? Like, how do you level up on that? Or is that even a consideration? Is it kind of like, well, okay, I'll run it again next year or in a couple of years and I can always aim to do better? Or is there something that, you look towards like, okay, that's off the list. Now there's something else. Like, how do you mentally process
Yeah,
that?
that's off the list for now, unless some other people jumped in and broke my record or something that might might fire me up to go back. But I'm done with Ultraman for now. But there's so many cool other events, like some longer, crazier multi-day run events, or some even like a 24-hour track run or something different that you're challenging a bit more speed, a bit more mental strength. So yeah, lots of options. But I've had quite a few people ask me, what's harder, an Ultraman or a 100-mile run? And yeah, 100-mile run still is top of the list so far. Like actually racing 100 miles, did Tarawera 100-mile last year in Rotorua in New Zealand here, and that's 16 hours of running as hard as you can. So like that's a different story to a 3-day spread out triathlon. That's a very focused, intense 100 miles of racing.
Yeah, again, and like the word that comes to mind is just almost unimaginable for a lot of people, for myself included here. But it's interesting all the same how it shows a world of possibility, right? Like if you can really set your mind to it, as cliche as that sounds, you dedicate yourself and your life and everything towards something. Obviously, there's accomplishment that can be had along that way. So your story speaks to that point, no doubt. Yeah, this last segment here, our crystal ball segment, as the name implies, looking towards the future, trends, predictions, so on and so forth. And we've already spoken lightly about this point of technology and how it's ever evolving, I suppose, and it becomes this variable unto itself, where it really can act as something that separates people. People who are performing already at a high level, if they have a little bit more data, perhaps, or they have a little bit more intimate knowledge of something, it can like I said, maybe separate them in a positive or negative way, perhaps. But returning to your world and what you're all about and coaching and whatnot, I'm guessing that you have to be constantly aware and abreast of all of these changes coming through. I mean, that could be exciting. It could also be a bit overwhelming at times. I'd love to hear, your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think there is a time and a place for technology. But as I say, I think the longer events that you go, like say it's a multi-day run, it doesn't matter what the numbers are saying. If you're 24 hours into a 48-hour run, if your watch is telling you that you're tired or you're sore or your lactic acid levels are too high or whatever it's saying, it doesn't matter for the race day. But I think using it in the training application is good, so you can monitor recovery, obviously power, pace, those sorts of things. And then it comes down to the individual. Are they really interested in it? And do they benefit from it, or is it a negative thing? And if it's negative towards their mindset or the way they're recovering or feeling, then I wouldn't be advising as much.
Well, I got to say, Simon, we've just blown through this conversation. I've enjoyed it from start to finish. I can't believe we're already approaching the end here. But yeah, thank you tremendously for all your insights. I know listeners are going to absolutely love this. Now, for those interested in learning more about Simon and his work, you can do so via his company, Athletic Peak. You can also find him on Instagram. And for reference, all this information, including links, will be in the show notes. And hey, if you like today's show, please be sure to tell a friend and share. You can also show further support by rating, reviewing, and subscribing wherever you access your podcasts. And off the top, I did mention that I have this YouTube channel. You can check out highlights from the audio recording. And if you do make it over there, I would love that like or subscribe. And finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as A, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. Until next time, stay curious about life and living.